We're live.
So we're back after a short break, continuing on S313. I won't go into it. I misunderstood. You actually are going to testify in that break. So for the record.
My name is Jay Ramsey, and I serve as the Director of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor.
Okay, you're going to talk to us about what I know it's not 313 specifically you want to talk about.
I would like to address the committee about adult CTE. Okay.
You're on.
Thank you. So just a little bit by way of my background, I used to work for the Agency of Education from 2011 to 2022, and I served in several different roles there. One of them was the state CTE director. I ended as an assistant director overseeing CTE and adult education literacy, all important components to the workforce development system and preparing students to get into the workforce and whatever their path is beyond high school. I moved to the Department of Labor in 2022. I became the registered apprenticeship director there and served in that role for about 8 months. And then I became the director of workforce development. In that role, my charge is the operation of our 11 job centers across the state and our federal and state funded workforce development programs. The CTE system is an important component of the workforce development system, especially in registered apprenticeship. We've been working a lot recently to make a stronger connection for youth and CTE programs to registered apprenticeship programs. Just quickly, a registered apprenticeship program is an employer's own training program that they put someone in who was maybe at an entry level or the common the touch point most people have is with electricians and plumbers. That is a registered apprenticeship program. Each program requires coursework. So the tech centers and their adult CTE programs, so we're thinking evening and weekend courses, is an important part of building out the registered apprenticeship system. We're seeing an increasing demand for that. And we need more training providers to be able to play a role in that system. So I'm here to simply say about economies of scale. We have 17 regional CTE centers. They don't all consistently offer adult CTE programming, again, evening, weekends, during school breaks. But we need to also be paying attention to that while we're contemplating what the big change is to the funding and governance of secondary CTE. I don't have a slideshow presentation. I'm here to extend beyond cradle to career thinking and encourage cradle through career. We have people all across the state that are paying taxes. The taxes are going to operate in the CTE programs and purchasing equipment and making sure that those programs are aligned with what employers are looking for. Taxpayers should also be able to benefit from those facilities, those pieces of equipment, and the training that could be offered through the tech centers for adults and employers. So that's what I have come here to talk about.
Okay, so large measure what you're simply saying as we go forward with this, don't forget.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I think the experience talking to those in the field was that they don't want to exclude adult education. You know, they want to fill their program. If they're oversubscribed and have all day programming, etc., it becomes a challenge for them, just like those are the ones that are oversubscribed now. But the ones that are underutilized would very much like to be partners in this. They face a lot of structural barriers to doing that. I mean, some of the centers said to us that they are not allowed to have adult education on site at the same time as K through 12 programming. So you heard me say this on the break. I don't see any way that the statewide ESAW solves any of that. I think there are ways to solve the problems right now and get us closer to a regional model. And if we have a regional high school, that would still require a special look at how adult education is offered. This really feels like kind of a return to like the shows I watched on Nick at Night as a kid, like you go to night school, you learn a skill. And you should be able to do that at your local high school. And by the way, we have a lot of the CTEs saying our partner programs like the hospitals are shutting down their teaching functions. So I feel like there's more that the Department of Labor could be doing to solve that problem. I don't see how one ESOP comes close to solving the myriad of regional problems that exist.
I think that beyond what you're,
Well, I think it is a little bit beyond, but it is certainly part and parcel of this discussion. And so let me just pick up on what you're saying about employers dropping programs. So the senators that are on the Economic Development Committee will know that the majority of employers in Vermont have 20 or fewer employees. They're focused on their business. They're focused on making things, producing whatever, helping people, and they don't have time to figure out how to get their employees trained. They don't have time to sort out the multiple different aspects of the workforce development system. And part of the strategy here to help those smaller employers, especially in the registered apprenticeship realm, is to bring about a little bit more of a structure to it and an access point for training, which would be the tech centers. And so that's sort of our mission right now, is to try to bring some sense to the training realm in Vermont so that our small employers have a place to send people, and our big employers too. I hear from them. They don't have a place to send this group of employees who need a little bit of basic training, if you will, on how to operate these machines or how to work safely. They want to be able to do that. So some parts of the state have a great system in their tech centers and their adult CTE programs, but by and large, it's not well funded, it's not well coordinated. So in the interest of taking a step, the department has in our base budget about $400,000 a year that we allocate to the adult CTE programs. So while the major changes to secondary CTE are being sorted out, we're still moving forward with investing in changing how that funding works. We're no longer going to be giving $20,000 a year grants to each tech center for their adult CTE program. We're on the cusp of releasing a request for proposals for 3 projects that would be funded at $100,000 each, and we'll commit to funding them for 3 years. And that will allow the tech centers to have some additional resources that they don't have access to for their adult programming, to coordinate in a geographical area, which some of them do, or to coordinate across the state in a sector-based approach. Maybe it's manufacturing, maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's something else. But we're starting the process of sorting out and bringing some sense, if you will, from a business perspective on how this part of the system works. We have Community College of Vermont. We have the Vermont State University. They offer credits. They're going toward a degree. What we're talking about is local access to short-term credential training that could potentially lead to coursework at CCV or Vermont State University or whatever the post-secondary institution is. But this is about local access and short-term credential training for employers to use and job seekers to access. The other data point that I want to mention is we have a really low unemployment rate still. And so that means there are not a lot of people out there looking for jobs. And so employers are hiring people who don't have a background or don't have a skill set because they need to, but they also need to have access to training for those folks. So that is part of the strategy here. Again, we're committing to 3 years. So that gets us to 2029. And then we'll need to revisit. But that's what we're working on right now in the interest of serving employers while the rest of these changes are being contemplated.
Yes, so
So is this tied in at all with the adult learning education? Or-
The Vermont Adult Learning and that's adult basic education. So that's through 4 nonprofit providers. That program is administered by the Agency of Education. Vermont Adult Learning serves the majority of the state. And then you have Northeast Kingdom Learning Services up in the Northeast Kingdom, the Tutorial Center in Bennington, and Central Vermont Adult Basic Education here in Memorial, Washington, Orange counties. That's a different part of the system, the workforce system for adults that don't have a diploma. Maybe they need to brush up on some skills. They're trying to get a GED.
So will they ever be able to meet? I mean, because I know Stafford Tech has evening adult learning classes that for of a
Yeah.
technical nature.
I think that a future state would bring about this change so that adults access maybe the tech center or maybe the comprehensive high school for whatever service it is that they need. And especially for people that are relocating and choosing to live in Vermont, those other states might have a system that doesn't have so many access points. Now, we like having access points, but it can be a little confusing for people.
thank you. Okay, so definitely that's next. So it's just that's time set aside for committee discussion. Well, I want to jump start the committee discussion. I have okay. So I want so to start this discussion, I want to take us back to November, December, when we visited schools in different parts of the state, and made an effort to get to rural Vermont. And then we've taken a lot of testimony over the last 6 weeks from school districts, superintendents, school board members, students. Taken a lot of testimony from students, teachers, and I think we have learned a lot or taken a lot about the differences across Vermont and what the needs are, and the need to put something together that is responsive to various parts of the state at the same time, trying to gain efficiencies, make the system work better. So, sort of, if you look at, I use the word purpose, but also could say goals to modernize. So, the language here, by the way, is as important as the math. I think it's maybe even more important before we're done. You know, math's important, but the language goes with it is important. So, you know, the goal here is to improve efficiency, governance efficiency, enable higher quality educational delivery. Key is moderate the growth rate in education spending. And this really gets to all the people who have testified for us, preserving local voice, where it demonstrably supports quality, cost effectiveness, is sensitive and responsive to the diverse needs of the state, and uses a structured voluntary process first, with limited and targeted involuntary mechanisms only if necessary. So stop there for a minute and say that what you have in front of you is a map with, I think it's 12, I've lost track, I've moved it so many times, 13, 12 SUs in the colors
Okay.
And then there's a lot of SDs, and I couldn't get the thing to put the boundaries on the existing SDs, but there's a lot of SDs in the gray area. That has been, for the purpose of the map, and we'll come to that in the language, left alone. But so the goal is to have these and by the way, I also want to say off the bat, this map is by definition not right.
Okay.
It's one person trying to make an effort to do what may make sense, but I did break up districts, and tried to follow the SU model where we have heard very specifically the parts of the state that it's very important to them. And so, but where the language really comes in is the goal here, and I'll just say it first and then we'll get to it. The goal is to reduce, we have right now 52, between SBs and SUs, we have 52 large units. The goal is to get that down below 25. And we have 119 districts, and the goal is to get that down below 60. So it's to cut the large units in half and the districts in half. And so what happens here, so the construct would be that if we were to pass this, at least conceptually, these SU lines would descend. Within the lines that are the supervisory districts, there will be a goal for those districts to merge to the point that they reduce their total by half, by 50%. And the same would happen with the districts within all the SUs. On a statewide basis, it's not SU by SU. It's on a statewide basis if we get down to below 60. And if we don't, then the board has the authority to reduce, to merge involuntarily. But there are a lot of places in these SUs where there are smaller districts that are close to each other that could easily merge. And I can think of some, and I don't want to go into specifics, but I can think of some in the area where I live. Very easy to merge a few. And that is true in all of these. So, so that's kind of what it is. It's reducing the large units by half. And so the only part that would be done with the passage would be the SUs, the lines of the SUs. Then the SPs would have 2 years to come together and merge. And then within the SUs, the districts would have 2 years to come together, make the decisions about merging. And at the end of that second year, the board would have the authority to do it and had to. Now, there's a lot of details in this that we can talk about and think through. So the goal is to give districts the chance to do it themselves, but to have it clear that we're going to get there, because this has all been time for the beginnings of the foundation formula, 3 years. That's when the foundation. So this would be in place by the time the foundation formula hits in 3 years. So, as a, that's the. So that's going to require provide a mechanism. Also, for districts that are in some of these areas, you don't force districts that are not alike to merge. Like if they operate K to 8 and then 9 through 12 choice. You don't force them to merge with a district that operates differently because that constitution doesn't work. You can't merge districts that are not like. So that's the concept. Yeah.
So my first broad generalized question, which is also with an understanding that this is a very rough draft,
Yep.
Very early stages.
Yep.
You describe how this idea is better than what was provided by the redistricting task force, and also how it avoids the pitfalls that were described by the task force.
I think, the task force, proposal is not going to get us to the point that we are controlling the rate of increase in education spending. At the rate that I think we need to get there. And this will provide produce larger units, which, as you've been hearing, is better education rate, more efficient. And so I think that nothing in here on the one, and by the way, the task force also talked about voluntary. So this has a period of voluntary, districts can come together on their own, see that it needs to happen and make it happen. There's, just in my area, it's very easy, it's very easy to go reduce by about 5 districts very quickly. And that could happen all over the state. So it can happen voluntarily. It doesn't conflict with the task force talking about A because it's voluntary, at least for the first couple of years. And there's nothing to prevent that to the extent that the both seats model will actually provide additional efficiency. That can happen.
So it's voluntary for 2 years, then it's voluntold after that.
Yeah, although it's not draconian insofar as it's not trying to force down into, 15, 20 districts overall. It's going to get 60 or less than 60. And that's very easily achievable by smaller districts or at different parts of the state, virtually frankly. In a way that preserved, because part of this was preserving, we heard a lot of testimony from rural Vermont about not wanting to lose their voice. They wouldn't lose they wouldn't lose their voice. You heard a lot about from districts that are non-operating, how important that non-operating status is, or the tuition status. Half of it involved schools, but districts like in the Islands, which are Islands in Essex County, talk about how important that is in particular, not the, among others. It preserves that. So I think that's the answer I have for that one for short one.
Last follow-up, regarding the losing voice, piece. So when a district is merged with another district, those 2 school boards become 1 school board. So if you're merging, so I mean, there would be a substantial elimination of school boards, right?
Yes, there would be fewer school boards, but hopefully like size with like size. In a lot of instances, so that we didn't want to do, for instance, we didn't want to just say you have to merge like with like, because then you'd be merging little tiny districts with one that would be the super district and would sort of dominate. This way, smaller districts can merge and maintain that smaller district feel that people are talking about needing. And so, yeah, you're right. 2 smaller districts, we go from 2 school boards to 1.
This is the last one.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right.
So so let's say 2 districts merge during this 2-year period, voluntary period, and then we get to the end of those 2 years and the state realizes we actually have to merge even more districts. Those 2 districts that merged into 1 during the voluntary district, they'd still be liable to potentially get merged into another.
That is, put a pin in that one. I've thought about that one and haven't answered it. I would put a pin in that one.
That's all
I think there could be something like a presumption that if you have merged voluntarily, that you were not remerged. But I don't know that we can say, yeah, what you're asking, what would happen if we don't hit the less than 60 with the voluntaries, and which we have to think that one through. Because if it's 2 very tiny districts, maybe that's not, really going to make a huge difference, but put a pin in that one because it's one of the things we have to think through.
Thanks.
Yep.
If I can, so everybody creates legends that have provide part of the story. And you highlighted number of students, number of towns, number of schools, and the grand list. Can you share why you use those 4 metrics?
I really didn't. They didn't use them. They're there.
Okay.
No, it really was much more geography. What and as we have taken testimony, what struck me as fitting together, and also not with the regular business.
And then probably missed it in your introduction, but what's the gray area? How do we deal with?
Yeah,
On
Those are-
my list,
those are the, that's, the gray areas are all supervisory districts. Those are town lines, by the way. They're not supervisory district lines. So within that, I forget how many there are, they're supervisory districts. And the idea would be for the supervisor, this reduces SUs by more than 50%. And so the goal would be to have the S&Ts merge, so they reduce themselves by 50% as well. And then all the districts within the SUs merge to produce less.
So can I characterize it as the organic approach?
Yeah.
That they figure it out over time, but
Well, 2 years. Yeah, semi-organic.
unlimited organic.
Unlimited organic, yeah, because I think that with Act 60, with the foundation formula coming into being in 2030, we need to have the ground wait for it, the way that's actually going to work. And my own view is, my guess is that we'll see even more district workers than required, because as the foundation formula is coming in, districts will realize more and more it makes sense to merge. Yes.
So over the period of the next 2 years of this organic merging, and they do, a lot of people are talking about merging right now.
Yeah.
So how do we keep track of it? What's the mechanism for managing this process? Is it our job? Is it Anthony's job?
The technical assistant for the helper, I would be agency. We have to put a pin in that one too. Okay. But we're gonna end up with a lot of pins here. We have to think through.
have some plans.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I appreciated Senator Weeks' question about the brand list per student. I do think that was maybe one of the most compelling things we heard last year, was to try and start to
Yeah.
equalize the grand list per student when you're looking at construction and facilities and bonding. That leads to my bigger picture question, which is that only means something if there are some similarities to how the SUs and SDs are structured. We did travel to enough schools, I think, to see that there is a range of how the SUs work. You know, I learned a lot from White River SU, because there are some things they're sharing and there are some things they're not. You heard me say that in regard to facilities. I think it's interesting that each part of the SU still controls only their school building. So certain communities were responsible if they want to fix the elementary school, certain communities are responsible if they want to fix the high school, and then they can add the tuition payment on for the rest. But they weren't all participating in the same bond votes, right? That's what we learned.
Yeah, you mean that a non-operating district doesn't participate in the bond vote?
I suppose, although if they operated a K through 8, they did the bond for their K through 8, but not the high school.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that's a great model to move forward with regionality in high schools, especially to allow too big of a range of how they all govern themselves and operate and vote for things. So, I mean, my big question is, what does each of these SUs do and what don't they do? Because if we're going to actually gain efficiencies, it will be consolidating administration, it'll be consolidating back end, and it'll be taking shared facility votes.
It will, well, the first couple of those, this is reducing the number of SUs by more than half. So there's more efficiency there, fewer superintendents, and so it'll be a little bit bigger SUs with more ability to spread.
We kind of always knew that that's kind of speaks to Steve's one district or whatever. You know, if we had one superintendent, we still have some governing units underneath, depending on how it was structured. So to really gain efficiencies, you do have to have a shared sense of what is the SU going to be conferred with doing versus the districts.
speaking of putting a pin in it, because SUs are creatures of statute,
Right.
so.
We'd have to flesh out
Yeah,
like what are
let
they
that out.
doing to actually gain those efficiencies? That was my second question. And then I didn't quite understand this notion of like and unlike districts. I mean, the White River Supervisory Union was a great example of they took some K-8, some, you know, non-operatings.
Well, no, they're actually, that district is K through 12. It's just that they accept some tuition students from surrounding towns that are,
So- Right. So if every supervisory union is going to be pre-K through 12, it's not.
Well, supervisory union will likely have some of each, but the districts within it will be different. Because otherwise there's BSDs. The reason for having the supervisory unions is that it can accommodate districts that are not exactly like. For instance,
What makes them not able to share resources better?
that's the creature of statute part, so we can talk about that.
Okay, I don't see how we gain efficiencies if we say, keep your district
Well,
within this larger supervisory union.
well, because we're making the districts merge, we're getting districts we're getting another fewer districts. So that alone creates efficiencies.
Even in the SUs.
Yes, they have to, districts in the districts within the SUs have to reduce by
Okay.
3% as
When
well.
you say like districts and unlike districts, I have no idea
Yeah, so.
what you're talking about. So.
Here's an example. One district might operate K through 8
Mm-hmm,
and then 9 through 12 choice.
mm-hmm.
Okay, another district might be fully not operating
So they just tuition their students
everything,
out
K
of
through 8.
town. Yeah,
That's a non-like structure. Those two districts could be in the same SU. They couldn't be in the same SD because in an SD, you have to have everything has to be exactly the same. So this is
so
allowing,
we keep all the towns that are non-operating would be their own districts within an SU.
yes, like they would likely be their own districts within an SU.
I still believe they have to share the administrative and facilities costs in an entire SU to gain any efficiency.
Okay, noted. We'll talk that through. So. But, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No,
Okay, so I did note that, and this is a follow-up from the conversation we were having last week in the committee, that you did have the number of schools per SU, and it varies, it's very quickly, it varies from 26 schools to 11 schools. And these are the principals, right? The follow-up is the number of how many principals can a superintendent manage? It's all a leadership question. And I'm curious, just how important was it to you in developing the map in evaluating the number of schools in an SU?
I didn't think so much about that as I did about just merging districts. And the efficiency that comes with merging districts.
And in developing this map, did you have any collateral thoughts about whether it's about what's more important, managing the number of students who are managing the number of principals or a superintendent?
Didn't get to that level, because I want it to be organic. Okay, so,
Thank you.
yeah, it was more geography. That's another good bit in. So I think by the way, Senator Heffernan has something he wants to propose tomorrow. We have some time set aside for that. And what would be helpful is if we can, people just want to make sure people get the concept here. It's,
I mean,
so it really is, it's reducing the large units by half and then the districts by half. At least. So which is, but on both scores is more efficient, maybe not as, I understand your issues, your questions about the total efficiency, but having fewer SUs is by definition more efficient if you have fewer superintendents and more capacity to have a bigger back office. And having fewer districts is more efficient, especially when they should obviously merge. And hopefully that's what will happen.
So will this also lessen school boards then?
Yes.
It says 25
Yeah.
school boards, and then
Well, when you have,
defining on how we're gonna, that's gonna be in the governance part of if we're gonna do boards or whatever.
you would have to get to that, I don't think. But so we go from 119 school boards to less than 60. So look at the school boards.
I mentioned this with the House Education Peter Conlon map, but I look at the places that have interstate school districts and they're politically powerful communities. And I think that we heard loud and clear that if we're gonna make Canaan go through a whole big thing, they have been working as hard as they can for as long as they can on an interstate district. And they're not really breaking through because it's not a politically powerful part of the state. I can't figure out any other reason why we keep ignoring that their absolute best option for their kids is to have an interstate district.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm not, I know that's true.
Okay, you just, every map isn't like aspirational
But that's
like the kingdom in any way.
So, as you know, they worked to, it takes two to do that.
Mhm.
And they have not been able to work it out with the surrounding towns. As much as they've tried, an interstate district could have happened, but they couldn't get. They said they worked on it for 10 years and weren't able to make it happen.
Could make it work when the
New Hampshire side.
New Hampshire.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's New Hampshire's fault it didn't happen. I'm just saying the two weren't able to come together.
Well, they're in a timely conversation right now, as I understand it, about district consolidation on the New Hampshire side. And if we could take some time to put some attention on it, have a New Hampshire education leader, legislator come tell us if there's appetite for that, I think that would be really helpful to those folks. There's no efficiency gained for them in being part of this huge district.
Well, it's where they are now, basically. So no efficiency gain, no change.
Well, I mean, not
No change.
really, because they have an Essex County SU. That now is shared with
Yeah.
Two other as
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly right about Keenan.
okay.
And if we could do
This is
anything,
not how they look.
if we can do anything, we can do anything to help Keenan, we'd all like to do it.
Let's start to put maps out that like tell New Hampshire, like, hey,
So,
we need some help.
so let's recount the, some of the pins we want to put in here. Yours,
Wasn't that if the district merges voluntarily,
Yes, yeah.
after your time period,
Yeah.
and then we don't hit that threshold after 2 years, they're going to be voluntold into another district.
yes. And center beats yours was, number of schools.
Number of schools per superintendent.
I think those yours was about, sort of the funding mechanism and role of the SU.
I mean, if cost modeling, I don't know exactly what efficiencies you're considering gaining besides, yes, fewer superintendents
Well,
generally.
and few school boards.
But I think we determined that school boards aren't adding a lot of
They're not expensive.
cost, yeah.
Can I ask a kind of a follow-up question to the cost modeling? Did JFO make their hire so we can begin to, so very quickly?
They did.
Yeah.
They did?
Yeah.
They're on board?
Yeah, best happened. Yeah. And actually, and then the, duties of the SU. Resolution, that can be thought. Yes,
Just another follow-up question is, how massive will the new SU school boards be if there's dozens of school district remaining even after they merge. That's
So,
or an SU of 40, 50 people.
so they, well, so you're, but let's just frame that question. You're thinking, so your question is, because SUs are representative from the districts.
Right, so there would be
So how
one
many-
rep from each
Yeah.
district.
Well, for instance, yeah,
Yeah.
so let's just think, will it be, how will the SU work become?
Yeah.
Okay.
How large will they be?
Hang on. Sorry, we see that.
Yeah, just a comment that, I had recommended that our government, operations colleagues begin to have this conversation. They're hesitant to do anything until we all agree on a number of districts as far as a goal. I think we're gonna run out of runway, and I think that this conversation at some degree should at least begin because, we can't use that as an excuse to say it wasn't touched, we didn't evaluate it, didn't have time, whatever the rationale might be. This conversation could start now. You have a very simple concept. You have, if you keep 119 districts, then, and put the districts contract, how do you approach that? I think that conversation should be happening already.
Yeah, hopefully the districts will figure that out, when they merge, because that's what tends to happen, they figure it out on their own.
That was
So,
my opinion about how we're gonna manage the voluntary mergers.
so what kind of help?
Correct. So that might kind of flow into what we're talking about. You
My-
have to look at ops.
Mine's related, but maybe not necessarily a GovOps question. We found that there were hotspots with voluntary mergers where there were no guardrails and some inequities or sort of inconsistencies occurred that weren't good for the kids.
You're thinking of orphan districts.
I'm thinking of orphan districts and, who wants, like, if I think of Chittenden County and who wants to merge versus what's best for the kids. Or what's best for the equity of the system overall, those tend to be different and we'd have to articulate.
Yep.
This is a big gray map blob that if we just said run at each other, like. It's not generally fair to the kids, all the time.
Yeah, so just try to figure out how to, well, I didn't wrote down orphan district, but it's
Sure.
bigger than orphan district, but I know the point.
Yeah, I mean, someone would essentially, the guardrails would look similar to some of the metrics that are important to us, that you
Yeah,
can't
sure.
have outsized grand list value with one merger and then, all ELL students and kids in poverty.
For what it's not dispositive, but the one thing about the foundational formula is the grand list matters less.
That's
Because,
true.
because you get X per student, everybody pays the same per month, everybody gets X per minute.
As long as you're all bonding together for facilities.
And that's a different question, we should have all this.
But it's
Yeah.
much easier to get,
So you're thinking about the bonding portion.
I'm thinking that that's the one thing that doesn't get addressed in the foundation formula.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have great high schools and stuff like this, and that's usually where we see inequities.
Yeah, but the school construction is,
Mhm.
a key part. So we've got to fit in school construction. So keep it busy. Yes,
When you're done with this map, I do have a request. A timing request prior to the meetings, but I don't want to interrupt this flow.
you're all,
Okay, so I see a school board a week, pretty much. And we're gonna go into meetings with, we're gonna get, 75% of our conversations with our constituents or meetings, they're gonna be about Act 73. One of the common questions is, property tax versus income tax. Okay. I don't have an answer, but I understand that the finance committee took testimony. I'm wondering, I'd like to request that the chair of the finance committee come in and brief us what they learned,
What is this?
just so that we're,
Income tax versus property.
just so that
Fund
we're,
education.
we understand, yes, to fund education.
Is that a serious proposal or just?
It's coming up. I mean, it's probably a quarter of every conversation is, well, you're not fixing anything without fixing the source of the revenue, da, da, da. I
overheard it.
I mean,
15 minutes,
yeah, tax equity is a different conversation than education. equity. So
15 minutes of just share with us what they learned. That's it.
Good.
who's share? Finance?
Well, I think in part, so that you can answer.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
okay.
I don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
And people are asking.
It's like, I mean, I can.
Yeah.
I can help you. You cannot replace the stability of the property tax with an income tax. Period. And that's beyond the mechanics and logistics of how differently they're collected. The income tax is way more volatile than the property tax, and it will always be a hybrid of the two, which it is now. It's
Well-
just not that
Well,
equitable.
we can, I understand. Um. Good for today. I'll try to frame these up and help us begin the process of sorting through this and then, the first one, but before people will be whether, you know, what do you think?
Are you gonna present in-house education like Peter Collins?
Yeah. Yeah. They asked me.
I'd be curiosity to know if this is how the
Yeah.
house will
Yeah.
react to this.
Yeah. So I think that what I really tried to do is want to go back to this, is I really tried to, we took a ton of testimony. And we heard some things loud and clear, I think. And I really tried to incorporate that in this proposal. About the needs of, well, how different the needs are around the state. And repeating them, it's not a one size fits all. So.
So how do we, for the next 2 years, manage the feedback? Yeah. From school boards and school districts and, you know, how we tie into this?
Yeah, that one we have down. So I think, you know, if we were to advance this, the next 2 years, districts would be really asking themselves what they should merge into some of them. There will be, there's a mechanism, there's at least language here. We have a mechanism for district to say, we're so different for whatever reason that we should be required to merge. That's fine. You can take that to the state board. But, okay, I'll organize these questions so we can start there about the right this point. So by the way, we're also obviously going to have people come in and comment on the exactitude of the now. Because I just did like Jeff Holland was careful to say, I just put some lines on to get the discussion started. And, I may not like Wyndham County, for instance, I don't know if I have that exactly right, for anywhere else. So to the world who's listening to this, if you're a superintendent or a school board member, and you look at this and go, that's not right, then come and tell us. So we'll talk. So I think that's yeah.
If we have some holes in the schedule this week, can we hear about the school counselor bill?
Yeah, we have some votes.
If,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's gonna move before town meeting day, which I respect. I just think a really big key to a lot of this is how much we actually let school counselors do their job when it comes to flexible pathways and student well-being.
Yeah, and we can, if we get some time, that raises, that whole thing also then raises, there's a whole bunch of issues tied up to that around
Unfunded mandate.
school and town school boards having.
Well, frankly, it gets to a bigger conversation that people are expressing they wish we would have, which is that we pay for school social services out of the education fund. And it would be a lot easier to stop doing that if we created actual clarity and standards for what mental health services and social services look like to schools and then funded separately.
not gonna get that done, but.
Well, it would be nice to just let the counselors do their
Yeah.
jobs. I think we could try to achieve that.
And
Okay.
principal,
So, we've got a busy,
Mayor, Chief Butler.
we've got a busy week ahead of us. So, we'll try to get the library bills, see if we're ready to go tomorrow. We did a little kind of walk through, try to get a little bit more testimony, and we'll wait for the language from, the Superintendent's Association on the, on 227. Then maybe with this, and we'll hear from Senator Heflin tomorrow. So
what time?
I walk you in that 45 minutes or something like that.
All of them. We do either 1:30 or, or,
1:30 to 3, okay.
I'll be ready either.
Anything else, anybody?